On today's Locked On Rockets Film Room Edition episode, we take a dive into Josh Christopher and his growth as both an offensive player and a defensive presence this season for the Houston Rockets. And we take a look at the brand new Iverson cut that the Rockets have incorporated into their offensive arsenal to better utilize Jalen Green in certain half-court sets. We're going to break it all down for you coming up right here at Locked On Rockets.
This is Mission Control, Houston.
Ignition sequence start.
With the second pick in the 2021 NBA Draft, the Houston Rockets select Jalen Green.
T-minus 15 seconds. Guidance is internal.
I'm going to keep working. I'm going to keep getting better every day. I'm going to keep perfecting my craft. And every time I step on that floor, I'm coming.
6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1.
What's up, and welcome to another edition of Locked On Rockets, your daily podcast home for everything Houston Rockets basketball. As always, I'm your host, Jackson Gatlin, also host of Locked On NBA Mondays and the founder of ClutchCityControlRoom.com. Be sure to follow along on Twitter at JT Gatlin, the show, of course, at Locked On Rockets, as well as at Clutch City CR. Loaded episode today as we're going to take a deep dive into Josh Christopher's growth this season, both offensively and defensively. What stands out to us on both ends of the floor for him? Thoughts from Stephen Silas on Josh Christopher's growth defensively, as well as diving into the Iverson cut action that the Rockets have been running pretty consistently as of late for Jalen Green to try and get him some easy opportunities in the half-court sets. But as always, appreciate you for making Locked On Rockets your first listen each and every day. Joining us now for another edition of Locked On Rockets Film Room is none other than the man, the myth, the legend himself, Alykhan Bijani, who you can follow on Twitter at Rockets_Insider. And today is a very, very special edition of Locked On Rockets Film Room. Not only because we're talking about Josh Christopher, and we'll do a quick deep dive on him in segments 1 and 2, kind of breaking down his offensive and defensive repertoire this season. We're also going to be breaking down the Iverson cut action that the Rockets have been utilizing to give good advantage opportunities for Jalen Green and Josh Christopher. But Alykhan, you're also going to reveal a bit of personal news later on in the episode.
Yeah, I'll be getting bugged. So I don't know how it started. Somebody asked Kelly, or somebody asked someone who their favorite team was, and then we all at once said we're not Rockets fans, and everybody got angry at us. First of all, it's a good thing that we're not Rockets fans, honestly. Because when you cover the game, you want to cover from an unbiased perspective, right? It just allows you to look at the game in a different way. What did I say that was wrong, Jesse?
No, nothing. It's just you're talking about how it's good to be not be a Rockets fan because you're able to cover the game from an unbiased perspective. And I'm sitting here wearing a Rockets hat backwards with all my Rockets memorabilia in the background. And
I don't want my guys who I'm cool with on Twitter and stuff to get angry at me for saying it. It's just like, when I first started my journey, I had a choice between doing it as a fan in terms of the fan perspective or doing it in terms of the professional route. And the advice I got from guys like Ben and other people who helped me back in 2012, 2013, say, hey, you want to make sure you stay professional. So I did that. And when I started going to games, stay professional. So it's been like that. But all to say is I'm going to reveal which team I root for or who I've been a fan of since I was a child. So I'm excited to share that with you. And no, it is not the Houston Rockets. So,
yeah, it's very interesting, right? You and
know
the others, Kelly,
Jackson. So I'm eager. I want to.
I know it's gonna be great. I'm ready for the reveal. It's gonna be amazing. It's gonna be like an unboxing video, but with Alykhan Bijani and his fandom. So let's get into it because this episode we want to focus on Josh Christopher, and he has really stood out this season. I feel like obviously we can go back to when Stephen Silas mentioned the fact that he didn't really expect Josh Christopher to be part of the rotation this season even, and the fact that Josh has gone out of his way, the growth, the development has been there, and he has earned his right to be in this rotation for this Houston Rockets team. So let's start offensively with Josh, because I think one of the interesting facets of his game is he utilizes the mid-range pretty effectively, but at the same time, when you look at his shot profile, it's not necessarily like true mid-range. And what I mean by that is he's not necessarily pulling up from outside of the painted area. It's like he gets his drives, gets going downhill, beats his man off the dribble, and he gets into the paint and then is able to elevate for that kind of like 10-foot jumper. We've seen him utilize that little like turnaround move that he has in the paint where he stops on a dime, defender kind of keeps going, and he kind of spins around that little like patented fadeaway of his. And so I'm very curious from your perspective, Alykhan, like, is there almost a way where we could maybe differentiate between like somebody who is utilizing the mid-range at large, like everywhere on the floor, versus somebody like Josh who really gets into the teeth of the defense first in the paint before pulling up for his jumpers?
I was talking about this with some other guys recently. When I look at Josh Christopher's game, I really feel like he can go as a, and what I mean by that is very good from that left corner. But he's able to get to the rim so effectively, both in the half court and especially in transition. If he starts that mid-range shot, but also adds a little floater to his game, he's hitting layups in transition. So I would say around the first 6 seconds of the shot clock, shooting 60+% around the rim, which is pretty good. You want to get better. That kind of shows me that he's willing to attack and push tempo and kind of get into a shot early. But if he's able to add that floater, that's really going to open up his game, because he is somebody who right now is all about, I don't want to use the word tunnel vision, but I'm going to describe it in a way where he knows that he can get to the rim at ease, and he's going to do everything. If he has some open daylight, he's going to try to get up a shot. And so from that 8 to 16-foot range, he's shooting 40% this season. Now you're like, well, Alykhan, 40% is not that good. Well, yeah, it's not, but I will say that it's much better compared to other rookies, number one. Number two, he's shown an ability to knock down that shot and also tough contested shots where long defenders on him, or a big up on him as well. And so in terms of translating what that can look like in the future, when he's coming off a high screen and roll, he is a guy who can eventually, hopefully, step up when a guy is playing drop coverage, get that painted area, touch the painted area, and then kind of step back and fade away a little bit and knock down that mid-range shot. That's just going to really open up his game. He's learning how to pass the ball in the half court. And when you can hit the mid-range shot, and especially when you're able to touch the paint and then score around the rim at an efficient level, passing comes. That's just the next part of it. Some people are natural-born passers initially, then they become scorers or add some offensive scoring to their game. Some players like Josh are just so good at getting to the rim that eventually that opens up passing. And we've seen that he can make those passes. Him and LP, it's really interesting. LP has assisted Josh the most out of any other Rocket. And that's because those guys have a two-man game. And they always run that little empty corner action, which we've talked about in a previous Lock on Rockets Full Moon episode, because that opens up the lane for Josh. It opens up some sealing and screening for Alpi as well. That little two-man game allows Josh to get to the paint at ease. If that's the case and teams start collapsing on him more, that's going to open up those nice passing lanes for him to be able to find others as well.
I think just to add a little more context too to the kind of shooting numbers at hand here. I know you mentioned the 8 to 16-foot range. If we break it down, from a different like spacing perspective, looking at Basketball Reference, he's actually from 3 to 10 feet. He's shooting a little over 50% from that area. So that's why specifically I wanted to look at it from the perspective of like when he gets into not quite all the way to the rim, right? But just, again, like 5 to 8 feet outside, 3 to 10 feet, whatever the metric is, because his shooting numbers, you're right, they haven't been that good from further out, from like the traditional mid-range area, I suppose, from about 10 to 16 feet, he's shooting just 32%. So those numbers, I don't want to say that they're concerning, but at the same time, it's him leveraging his ability as somebody who can get to the cup so effectively to kind of open up the rest of his game. And I love that you bring up the passing angle as well. The final point here on his offensive game before we transition over to the defensive side. I love how self-aware Josh is as a player and just kind of understanding where he's at with his game, because he's spoken to us, the media, before about maybe, areas that he can improve. And he talks about, well, at times I think I can be a bit tunnel vision, right? Where I'm so, focused on trying to do what I'm going to do in transition or in the half court that I'm not noticing little things going on, elsewhere in the offense. And then as well as his passing game, I put together a compilation video earlier this season of Josh Christopher's passing game and specifically his bounce passing. He is like on the money every single time when he's throwing a bounce pass. I don't know where it came from. I just started watching these games and I was like, he doesn't miss when he's throwing bounce passes. They're like on the money every single time. And then it happened to be like 2 or 3 weeks later, I brought up his passing game offensively, what he's looking at. He's like, well, I feel really confident in my bounce passing, but I think that elsewhere, like I need to get better at throwing lobs, like over the top, getting over the defense and not just relying on the bounce passing so much. And so it was one of those like full circle moments where I was like, man, like he really understands like where he's excelling in his game and where he needs to improve in his game.
Yeah. Josh probably hasn't played with a big man like Alp, who's so effective scoring from the post and kind of operating from a post. And I will argue and say that I think Josh Christopher is one of the best infield passers on the team. That's because of that bounce pass like you talked about. And last thing on Josh's offense, that floater I mentioned, 46% in the floater this season. It's probably going to get better. But that just shows you he's learning. They are working with him. Jackson, you go to games really early all the time. You see Josh warming up. You see Josh at practice. They are learning. They are teaching him how to be able to be more effective from that paint area because they know what his strengths are. If they can make that above 50%, 46%, look, he's 19 years old. If he gets 50, 55% of those players, imagine how much more because you know how athletic he is, you know how quick he is. And I've said this multiple times on the show. He is, I call it the Jalen Alykhan like excitement. He to me is the most fun rookie to watch on this team because I think the world of him. I think he's going to be a great player in this league. And you can't really contain what his ceiling could be because of how much growth continues to show game by game.
He is absolutely electric. And between Alperen Şengün and Josh Christopher, like one of those two guys is the absolute steal of the first round of this last year's draft. And the fact that the Rockets have both of them, at their disposal is just incredible. It's, very exciting to consider for the years to come for this Houston Rockets team. But we're going to kind of flip the script here. We're going to focus on Josh's defense coming up here in just a moment after a quick message from our friends over at BetOnline. BetOnline is your number one source for all of your sports betting needs and info. Find all the latest sports developments, including this week's Masters Championship odds, podcasts, and reviews for all the different leagues this season. And hey, look, the Lakers did Lakers things this year, are eliminated from the playoffs. And right now you can get in on the action to figure out who will be the next Lakers head coach. Right now, David Fizdale is the favorite at plus 300 to take over the mantle from Frank Vogel. You got Quinn Snyder coming in at plus 450, Doc Rivers at plus 475. Not exactly sure he would abandon the James Harden, Joel Embiid duo to just go try and deal with the dumpster fire that is the LA Lakers. But you can get in on all of that action and more over at BetOnline. Head to the website today or use your mobile device to learn more about the trends and action available to you. BetOnline, it's where the game starts. And continuing on here at Locked On Rockets, your daily podcast home for everything Houston Rockets basketball. As always, appreciate you making Locked On Rockets your first listen each and every day. For your next listen, go check out the Locked On Now podcast. Nightly recaps of every NBA game with analysis from our local experts. Free and available wherever you get your podcasts. Keeping things focused here on Josh Christopher, moving to the other side of the basketball. Coming into this season, it felt like there was a ton of optimism about Josh Christopher and the impact that he could have defensively, not just right away as a rookie. Obviously, there's some growing pains. There's some learning that has to take place on that side of the floor, but optimism as to what he could be over time at the NBA level. So I actually asked Steven Silas about this the other day, and he gave a really, really solid response. Hey, Steven.
Hey.
Coming into the season, felt like there was a lot of kind of organizational optimism about Josh Christopher and his ability to be a really strong defender at the NBA level. How have you felt that he has kind of grown and developed on that side of the floor as the season has gone on, specifically as a point of attack defender? And what are some of those conversations with him like about the way that he can impact the game on that side of the ball?
Yeah, those conversations are ongoing, obviously. And at times for a young guy, especially like after last game when he had 30, the defense can be secondary. And for him, it has to be at least equal. And I think he does do a good job of putting pressure on the basketball as the ball's coming up the floor and using his gifts of quickness and strength and anticipation. But yeah, he I think with more experience, with his ability to kind of guard different people and going through those moments, he will become even better than he is right now. And like I said, when you're 20 and you have the ability to score at times like he does, sometimes that's what you're concentrating on. But I still believe, and he knows that he can be like a really, really good defender as well. So that would kind of fill in the circle of his game, where he is an attacker on the offensive end, making threes when he's wide open, and then really, really setting the tone on the defensive end. And I think I'm not sure he understands. Well, I won't say understands, but he can really, really influence the group with his ball pressure. And that's one of the things that I talk to him about, as far as, yeah, we want you to be a good defender. We want you to apply ball pressure, but that ball pressure can affect the rest of the group. And that's something that, as you play more games and get more experience, you start to understand your importance as part of the whole instead of just my job.
A really, really in-depth, kind of thorough response from Steven Silas about the way that Josh Christopher is able to kind of impact the game on the defensive side of the ball. Now, Alykhan, I have, my own kind of thoughts and opinions about what we've seen out of Josh as the season has really progressed. But first, I want to get into just kind of your immediate takeaway on Josh as a defender, and kind of what stands out to you about him on that side of the basketball.
If you guys have a chance to rewatch the basketball games or watch the highlights or wherever you go, YouTube or watch games, pay attention when Josh is on the floor to defense, especially when he's engaged. Who talks on the floor when he's on the floor? He is calling the assignments. He's calling he's creating weak. He's creating defense. Former turn the everything defense the ICD used to do. Now it's called something else. He'll call up different coverages. He'll take responsibility. But what Steven Silas just said, which is really interesting to me, Jackson, he targeted Josh Christopher's ball pressure. And ball pressure is so important because if you've seen the term on Twitter, POA, or point of attack. What is that? Point of attack is essentially when you are guarding your man up front, and that initial action, initial move, initial dribble, whatever they're doing in terms of that initial, action to get towards the rim, that's your point of attack defense. And to me, Josh, with his athleticism, with his length, and how quick he has very quick hands. He is very, very, I think the best way to say it, he likes to get the ball. Some to be able to catch up. He likes to get in lanes. That to me is a big part of why the Rockets are so excited about him. And I'll give you stats real quick for this season. A majority of his defensive possessions are when he's guarding the pick and roll ball handler out of drop coverage, or he's either going over or under the screen. So they're playing drop, and it's a good three-point shooter. He's obviously going to go over the screen. If it's not a good three-point shooter and he has to be able to stay with them, to go under the screen. But NBA teams also have different types of defenses. One called weak. Weak is a term essentially when you're forcing the offensive player to their weaker hand. Most NBA players are right-handed. So what does that mean? You're going to force the screener and the ball handler to go, if they're on the right side, go back towards the middle. If they're on the left side, you're going to try to force them away from the middle. But the ultimate goal is to get them towards their weaker hand. Josh is really good at that. But his numbers will indicate that he's only the 37% when it comes to defending pick and roll ball handlers. But the key thing that sticks out to me, he's forcing turnovers on almost 22% of those possessions. So on 22% of those possessions where he is defending the pick and roll ball handler, that's 1 in 5. He is forcing a turnover. That means that he's doing a great job with his point of attack. When what Steven Silas is saying, he has to be better about being engaged on, especially whenever, because he's focused on the offensive and obviously every rookie is, but he has to be better about being engaged. He has to learn to get better at the fundamentals. You can't expect a rookie, any rookie, to come in here. Everybody's not Evan Mobley. You can't expect him to come in here and know the basics of a pick and roll defense. know how to properly close out at the NBA level, know how to properly be able to dig. Dig means that you're standing and you're kind of digging your arm whenever a guy is driving towards the rim. You have to learn these things at an NBA speed. And once he learns that, and now he learns how to get on the floor and make those right reads defensively, then this vision they have for him is going to happen. But as of right now, he's learning. He's getting all this on tape. The numbers quit, but that one number on turnovers helps prove my point that he is good at point of attack defense, and he's going to help his Rockets team especially be one of their best point of attack defenders in the future. You pair him with a guy like Jalen Green. You hopefully add another guy in the back line who can be a good rim protector for you. That's two guys that you can count on to be able to defend and wall up that perimeter and also be a backline defender in the paint. Those are two integral pieces for a championship team.
No, and I think too, when you look at, and that's why I tried to phrase the question the way that I did for Steven, because I kind of wanted his thoughts specifically on what Josh brings to the table when he's at the point of attack as a defender, not necessarily like, him, playing out of help or him as a weak side defender or anything of that nature, because those are other things that you're going to kind of learn as you develop and as you get more accustomed to like NBA level schemes and all that kind of stuff.
Aspect of it, it doesn't smaller than a lot of wings or bigs, but he can get there, Jackson. And you're right. I think both have very good potential defensively. Steven Silas clearly is. Rafael Stone clearly is. I've asked him about Josh, he's brought up the comparisons of Eric Gordon and Drew Holiday. So there's a reason people are bullish about Josh Christopher, and he's showing it. He's giving you he's giving you a tease of what to expect from him after this summer into next season.
Yeah, and as far as just the point of attack defense is concerned, I do think there have been maybe some moments this season where he's been maybe a bit over eager at times, right? Like, one moment that really stands out is against the Lakers in a couple of those matchups, right? There'll be times where he's like checking Russell Westbrook and he's like all the way out, like pressuring Russ, like well past the 3-point line. And sometimes in those moments, right, if it's Russ, like if he beats you off the dribble, then that's already, it's set your defense in motion. The rotations are happening. And so it's like situations like that where it's like, well, you don't necessarily need to pressure Russ all the way out past the 3-point line, right? Like be a bit of a smarter defender, back off of him, use your gifts to kind of impact elsewhere on the floor, because Russ is not a reliable outside shooter. Little things like that are going to, like, he'll learn over time. And I'm sure that's something that they sat down and kind of pointed out, like, hey, we love that you're pressuring the ball, but you don't need to pressure the ball with this guy, on the floor, essentially.
Yeah, the term NBA coaches use college coaches, KYP, know your personnel. He's going to learn his personnel as he gets more time in the league. He will be the same.
All right, well, with that coming up, we want to dive into the Iverson cut action that the Rockets have been kind of incorporating more so in their offense as of late. Also, just kind of the general philosophy of Steven Silas's offense. We're going to get there in just one moment. And final segment here at Locked On Rockets, your daily podcast home for everything Houston Rockets basketball. As always, appreciate you for making Locked On Rockets your first listen each and every day. For your second listen, go check out the Locked On NBA podcast. It's your local NBA experts Monday through Friday, breaking down the biggest stories across the entire NBA. I host the Monday show. It's always a ton of fun. 3 interviews from around the league. Be sure to go check it out wherever you listen to your podcast. Also on YouTube. Now, Alykhan, let's get into, before we get to your big reveal here at the end of the segment, let's get into a little bit of just kind of the offensive philosophy for this Houston Rockets team, because I do think that one of the, general kind of feelings running around Rockets fans is they don't necessarily understand the identity of this Houston Rockets team or what Steven Silas is trying to accomplish. Now, I think I understand the identity, but I'd like to hear it from an expert like yourself and kind of see if you can put it in more so, like, I don't want to say layman's terms for me and everybody else, but just kind of breaking it down to its core essence.
So Rockets fans, if you follow me, I love running polls. It's just a good way for me to be able to get insight to what you guys are thinking. So when I put a poll out there, please, participate. It's anonymous on Twitter. So it's just a good way to kind of get a pulse of what fans are thinking. So I asked this question on April 5th. Said during one of the Rocket Spaces that Dave, Clutch Fans, and Rouge hosted recently, they had a discussion with the fan about not really knowing what Steven Silas' system was. So I asked, do you feel like you know what the Rocket system is on offense, defense, or both? Out of 458 votes, 16% said yes, 84% said no. And I look at it from different perspectives. One perspective is, I personally feel like that Steven Silas has talked about it. I have asked him about this. Many media have asked him about this. There's stories written about this. I feel like there is enough knowledge. And sometimes, there's so many stories that come out that we sometimes forget about. Some of the stories that were published earlier in the season or last season. I feel like this was talked about. And so the fact that fans may not know or remember, that's a little concerning to me in terms of, it's more like it was a self-reflection for me that I got to do a better job of articulating these types of points to fans, because these are the type of content that they want to hear. They want to hear what their favorite team is doing. And so I apologize if my coverage did not really put that out there. Second thing is I want to bring up the points that I saw a lot in my mentions was that Silas is very basic. He only has one set. It's basically it made it seem like that the Rockets don't have an identity. So I want to ask you before I even say anything, Jackson, what do you think? And we've had this conversation before. And what do you think is the Rocket? Let's start on offense. What do you think is their offensive philosophy?
I definitely don't think that they, I think that transitioning from like the previous era of Rockets basketball, where we became so accustomed to the Rockets like hunting switches and mismatches and all of that with James Harden, very heliocentric. I do think that this iteration of the Rockets offense under Steven Silas is essentially they're looking for an advantage wherever they can find it on the floor. And sometimes that advantage is going to be Christian Wood mismatched onto a smaller player. Sometimes that advantage is going to be Jalen Green or Kevin Porter Jr. with a mismatch on a big. But I think that ultimately Steven Silas empowers a lot of his players on the floor to make those decisions in the moment, right? He's not necessarily hunting for one specific mismatch consistently throughout the game. And he kind of allows the personnel on the floor to dictate what is happening in conjunction. I think that a lot of his offense is hyper-focused on the drive and kick game. Now, maybe that's boiling it down to very bare bones because, you can point to every NBA team and say, well, yeah, drive and kick is obviously a very important part of the game. But specifically with this Rockets group, with the way that they play, they like to play fast. They like to be able to get into and attack defenses before they're set. And if you pay attention to this team, when they're getting out in transition, when they're attacking, even if they don't necessarily get the transition bucket, if they're attacking a defense before it's set in the half court, they already have the defense scrambling. And so then that's when you get into the drive and kick, you get those opportunities where you see them kicking it out, making the extra pass, swinging the ball around the top of the key to get to the next man. And that gives them better opportunities to attack an unset defense or a scrambled defense rather than having to play in the half court, which isn't exactly one of their strengths at this point.
If you guys have a chance, I'm gonna have two recommendations for our listeners. Go back and listen to Jalen Green's post-game interview versus Brooklyn. He kind of talks about the offense a little bit in terms of what they're trying to run, things like that. Second thing is I want you to Google something. If you're a Rockets fan, you want to learn about the O's, you want to just learn about the team. Google 5-out transition offense. You want to learn what the Rockets are running? It's a 5-out transition offense. It's kind of, I think the term Steven Silas used a few days ago was they call it a pace 5-out game, but essentially it's 5-out, right? What does that mean? Well, it means that you have all 5 of your players around the perimeter. And the goal is to maximize as much space as possible. So when you get paint touches, it's either a paint or if somebody collapses because you get a paint touch, the spacing is all there. Everybody's filled into their spots or roles. You got 2 in the corner, 2 in the slot, and then you got a guy at the top of the key. That's all it's about. And once you have that mismatch, Jackson, like you referenced, they want to get 2 on the ball. Steven Silas always mentions it. If you ask him about this offense, the first thing he mentions is, I want to be able to, have my players make decisions by putting 2 on the ball. Once 2 defenders are on the ball, that opens up a lot more of your offense because you're able to do the driving kick game, move side to side. The Rockets offense is not predicated, as many teams are actually, about finding the first open shot. It's about finding the best shot. Now, people can hear that and say, oh, that's something everybody says, right? Well, no. I mean, if you're running in transition and you find an open shot, if it's not a good shot, you're not going to take it, right? You want to find the best shot. That's what they're trying to instill these Rockets players. They're making sure they're running these actions if they can't find the transition to being it going. And I just want to bark back at somebody. Somebody said that Steven Silas only has action that he uses over and over again. That's not true, guys. Like, come on. If you don't recognize it, say you don't recognize the actions, but don't lie on social media and say, oh, I know Steven Silas only runs one action. Come on, guys. Like, no, stop it. So offense, that's right. Defensively, right? You want to run drop coverage when you have Alpi in the game just because it minimizes the amount of time he's on the perimeter. Even though he's shown he can play on the perimeter, you want to minimize as much of that as possible so you do have a rim protection presence there. And you want to also give him reps and drop coverage, I would say, is the base defense. Not only is it drop coverage where you have a big in the paint and a guy either going over or under the screen, it's also about the help. Rockets are a team that loves to have a help defender slide over on the roll, which opens up the three, which creates something where the position. If you're listening online, X position is basically you're kind of splitting the difference. You're basically guarding two shooters, and when the pass is made to the corner, you go to the corner, and the guy who helped will rotate back over to the wing, and that's called Xing out on defense. But the Rockets are one of those teams that ideally, they obviously don't do a good job in the top of that defensively, giving up as much points and threes as they do once a team starts to paint. But that's the goal. You play help defense, take away the roll, you rotate back out, take away the three, and you kind of make the offense go from there. And then also you add in some switching, as we know. But that's pretty much what the Rockets do defensively. Offensively, Jackson, you perfectly summarized it. I hope that gives Rockets fans a better idea of what their team is doing. I don't want to sit here and get into the nuances of, what specific action is this or what is that? I think ultimately it's about driving kick. It's about moving side to side. It's about not finding the first open shot, but the best open shot.
It's funny that you say, I don't want to sit here and get into the specific action about what's this and that, because we are going to get into the specific action of what's this and that. Alykhan, I don't know if we've ever had what's called, I'm going to call that an anti-tease. Alykhan was like, you know what? There's a piece of content coming up right here on the show, and I'm going to tease against it by just completely you know what? We don't want to talk about this anymore. But we did mention it earlier. There's a newer action that the Rockets have involved as of late in their offense, and it's called the Iverson Cut. And I'm going to hopefully do a good enough job kind of explaining the positions of the players on the court as this play is kind of happening and developing. So from the perspective that I haven't mapped out at, we have the primary ball handler kind of at the top of the key, kind of setting up the action. And the way that this play can be run, it can be run either essentially going from left to right or right to left, right? And so I probably shouldn't have said the word right one more time there at the end, but you get what I'm trying to say here. So the way that we're going to describe it is if you're looking at the basket, so from the point guard's perspective, Jalen Green is off on the left-hand side wing. And then you have the center, we'll go with Alperen Şengün, kind of occupying the top of the key area, kind of free throw line area. And then you have one of your shooters occupying the opposite corner from Jalen Green. And then you have your wing in, we'll say, Jae'Sean Tate occupying the slot on the right-hand side of the floor. And the play that I'm kind of mapping this off of, you have Jae'Sean Tate who comes cutting across the floor to set almost like a double drag screen, sort of, while Jalen cuts across the midway part of the court. And what he does is he actually stays kind of tucked under the three-point line in this cut as he's making his way towards the basket. And then the point guard, the primary ball handler, hits him with a pass, and it allows him the opportunity to kind of get the ball off the catch, going downhill with the defender being kind of separated from him by these two back-to-back screens by your big man and your wing in Jae'Sean Tate. And it gives Jalen the opportunity to either hit that mid-range area, shot that he's added to his repertoire, or get straight to the rim and get an easy opportunity at the bucket, depending on what happens with that final defender, the person who's checking the three-point shooter, either in the strong side corner or in this specific action, if the strong side corner is empty, where that player runs to the opposite side, to the weak side of the floor, then it opens things up even more so while running this action. So Alykhan, take it from here. What are you seeing when the Rockets run this play, live in a game setting?
I want to give a shout out to Hey Partner on Twitter for bringing this to my attention. He asked me this question when we were taking suggestions from listeners about what we want to talk about. I think it's a terrific play to mention, because not only because we have a few games left, but because this has become a very big staple for both Jalen Green and Josh Christopher in the Rockets offense. Now, Jackson did a great job of explaining it. I think if you are a Rockets fan and you have heard Locked on Rockets Film Room before, there is a play you may recognize if I say it out loud. It's called Cash. Cash is a little baseline out of bounds play that they like to run when the passer's on the baseline. You have somebody coming off two screens and getting the ball and be able to shoot or drive, etc. The Rockets run this action in the half court as well, off the sideline as well. It's similar to Cash, where you have basically, as Jackson described it, you have two bigs at the top. So they're probably going to be stationed in Horn's position. What is Horn's? It's more like a flat set where you have one of your bigs at the right free throw line extended and one of your bigs at the left free throw line extended. And then what you're going to have is one player who shoots across the court. So essentially, you're going from one post or elbow all the way to the other. And if you're looking at this like I'm a line scrimmage, I'm like a wide receiver. Think of it as a jet sweep. A wide receiver is running parallel to the end zone, so in basketball terms, parallel to the baseline. And then he gets the handoff, so he gets the pass, and he's going to go north-south. Or, he can improvise and do a lot of different things. So there's a lot of different things you can do here. You can get a backdoor cut, so you don't have to go through both screens. You can kind of just go through the initial screen and kind of cut inside. You can get the pass and clear out that corner like Jackson talked about. And Jalen Green loves that. Because why? Because Jalen Green loves to be able to drive the baseline. He likes to use the rim for protection against shot blockers, and also because he knows he's able to get past a lot of players whenever he drives right. And that's what kind of makes it easy for him to be able to read when they have him come off this play. Or even better, he's hitting those mid-range shots at a very effective level, very efficient from the mid-range. He can kind of knock it down whenever they need a quick bucket just to kind of be able to get them going. This action is being used at the start of games for Jalen Green. This action is being used after timeouts to get Jalen Green going. This action is primarily used to get Jalen Green going right, where he enjoys. Most players would like to go to their left and then go back to where's the middle. Jalen actually likes to be able to just fully go right and then be able to kind of use the right side of the court right now early on in his career to be able to make his move. Hey, partner, who I also shouted out earlier, he brought up this question. He also pointed out, I think it's a very smart observation, that the Rockets like to also do this out of something that Jackson mentioned called double drag, where it's instead of having those two wings at the free throw line extended, they'll be beyond the perimeter, and they'll kind of come off those double drags and be able to attack and go from there as well. Anything that gets Jalen Green a running start is good. Yes, I know Rockets fans want to have the ball in his hands, bringing up the court, but also he's so lethal when he comes off of screens. He's so good, kind of using his quickness and his quick first step to be able to get around players, that this is an action that kind of gets him going. It's like you want to get your best player across the formation without trouble. This is your go-to play to do that.
And not only for just Jalen Green, we've also seen, I think, a couple times be used for Josh Christopher as well, where he's another guy that can really benefit from getting downhill, getting ahead of steam. And if he, sometimes he just needs that little bit of separation from his defender. And that's exactly what this action, attempts to accomplish.
For Josh or Jalen, they get to go horizontal and then they go vertical. That's how the best way to think about it. When you're watching a Rockets game, so if you're watching the last two Rockets games, or you're going to be a part of that big Twitter party they're having in the Atlanta game, when you're there, pay attention to this. They run this Iverson action a lot. And by the time the show is published, I'll have a video up on Twitter that kind of explains what the Iverson cut is. So, or at least gives you a diagram of the Rockets using with Jalen Green and Josh Christopher, so you have an idea. But it's a great play. Just think of it when they're running horns, basically two guys in the middle, free throw line extended. Jalen Green comes off of it, going horizontal, then he goes vertical. He has multiple options, mid-range. He can step back, get into an isolation. He can drive. There's a lot of different things that he can do with it. It just opens up a lot of really good opportunities. And the Rockets have not only started doing that as a basic set, not only, like I said, they run it out of cash, which is their baseline out-of-bounds set that we went over previously, but they're adding variations of it. They're inverting specific screens. They're doing small things that you're really starting to see the genius from Steven Silas with his offense. Early in the season, he wasn't ranked that high when it came to his after timeouts or the plays he drew up. It's mainly because of the poor spacing and lack of shooting. The Rockets have been going, the rookies are starting to hit their shots. He's climbing up there, and his team is getting more confident. You're starting to see the efficiency rise up. So players are doing well. He's going up the ranks, and I think Rockets fans are starting to see how good of a coach Steven Silas can be with X's and O's.
All right, Alykhan, it's that time for your special announcement. And this is going to be, I'm sure Rockets fans, some of them may have already possibly figured it out. Others are probably completely in the dark. But please, do us the honor of letting us know what team you are actually a fan of when it comes to NBA basketball.
Oh, man. I'm going to get clowned for this. Uh-oh. I want to just say, I am not a Sacramento Kings fan. So at least and I am not a fan of a team that waves a player who shot 9 of 12 from the field when they're trying to tank really hard. If you're an avid NBA watcher, you know which team I'm talking about. But anyways,
oh my goodness, there it is in all of its glory. I can't be the ones to say it for our non-visual audience, Alykhan. You have to split, drop the news.
So I am a Memphis Grizzlies fan. Jackson's reaction. Oh my God. So I became a fan in the late 2000s. I really enjoyed watching Gasol and Randolph and just the little high-low action they did. Honestly, that's what got me going, was little high-low passes. That's when I was younger. Remember, guys, I'm pretty young, all right? So please don't judge me for this. And I really enjoyed watching the high-low passes, and they really got me into the X's and O's, a lot of the stuff. I just kind of kept up with them through the late 2000s, early 2000s when they were great. Big fan, obviously, of those guys, the grit and grind days. They never could get past the Spurs or the Thunder or the Warriors to get to a chip. But I just had so much fun watching them. And yeah, we went through some tough few years, but now we're back. And I think
Y'all hear that? Y'all hear Alykhan saying we? Like, this is, all this time, all these Locked on Rockets film room episodes. And he's like, if you're a fan of the Rockets, if you look at what the Rockets are trying, and now it's suddenly he breaks out the Ja Morant jersey and it's we this, we that, like high-low passes, my favorite team.
Hey, well, I'm going to say Jaren Jackson for Defensive Player of the Year. All right, it's Ja Morant, not only most improved player, but get some MVP votes. And Taylor Jenkins, one of the best young coaches in the league. I'm just in the young bandwagon, man. I'm really excited for the playoffs. I think they're proving a lot of people wrong because of how smart they play, how well they play together. It's a really good team, and I'm glad I get to enjoy them. So, yeah. And no, I've been seeing photoshops of him in a Rockets jersey. Ja Morant is not going to the Rockets. Let's stop right now.
Oh my God. All right. Well, you know what? We'll get you hooked up with a Locked on Grizzlies, segment spot at some point. So you can talk about your actual favorite team, not the team that you cover. No, Alykhan has a lot of love for the Houston Rockets organization. Being able, having the opportunity to cover this team is very special.
I will tell you. So I like the Rockets going up too. Let me be honest here. Okay. Let me be honest. I like the Rockets going up here. People are like, you're lying. I like the Rockets. My favorite player was Chuck Hayes. Actually, one of my favorite moments being on the Rockets beat was when Chuck Hayes, when I started going to games, and Chuck Hayes on the scouting team. Now he's the director, but I met Chuck Hayes for the first time, and I was so nervous. And I think Chuck could kind of figure out I was nervous, but that was a really good moment for me because I'm a big Chuck Hayes fan growing up. I used to watch the Rockets when they had Kyle, they had Ron, when they had Samuel Dallas, when they had Marcus Camby, Marcus Camby hitting full court. So those were the days, the early Kevin McHale days. Yeah, I remember watching those teams play. I got a lot of love for Houston, a lot of love for the Rockets, but yeah, definitely been a Grizzlies fan though since I've been a kid. So.
It's okay. We're going to change your handle to Grizzlies Insider a little bit later on. But with that, Alykhan, another very productive Locked on Rockets film room episode. Always love the opportunity to sit down and talk hoops with you. Do me a favor. Let us all know where we can track down your content.
Yeah, you can follow me on Twitter at Rockets_Insider. You can follow Rockets Film Room on YouTube. And I think you should definitely go follow Clutch City Control Room on Twitter. Subscribe to them on YouTube. Give my guys some support. A lot of good people on there doing content. Go give them some support. So, yeah.
Appreciate all the plugs, Alykhan. As always, thanks for stopping by Locked on Rockets.
Thanks, Jackson. Thanks, everybody.
That's going to do it for today's episode of Locked on Rockets Film Room. As always, appreciate you for checking out the show. If you haven't done so yet, please consider subscribing wherever you listen to your podcasts, Apple, Spotify, Google, the brand new Odyssey app, free and available on all platforms. Also, check out the YouTube channel, search Locked on Rockets on YouTube, like, comment, subscribe, all of that. What do you think about Josh Christopher's development this season? What do you think the ceiling truly is for him at the NBA level? Let us know in the comments. We do read each and every single one of those every single time you post one. I try my best to make it through all the comments, even if I don't have time to reply to them. I do read all of them. But as always, thank you so much for watching. Thank you so much for listening. And we look forward to having you back right here at Locked on Rockets, your daily podcast home for everything Houston Rockets basketball.